The young waitress stood frozen as her manager screamed, "You're fired. Get out before I call security." Every customer lowered their eyes, except one. A quiet 50-year-old billionaire slowly rose from his table and calmly said, "No one is firing her today." The restaurant fell silent. But what happened next shocked everyone. When he discovered who the frightened waitress really was, tears filled his eyes. The secret she had carried since childhood would change both of their lives forever and prove that kindness always finds its way home. A few hours before everything changed, the morning began like every other exhausting day. The young waitress woke before sunrise inside a tiny rented room where peeling paint covered the walls and the sound of traffic never truly stopped. She quietly folded the blanket she shared with her younger brother, prepared a simple breakfast, and reminded him to stay focused on school because education was the only gift nobody could steal. Although life had been painfully unfair, she smiled before leaving, believing that hope was stronger than hardship. The restaurant was already crowded before noon. Customers filled every table, orders arrived faster than anyone could carry them, and the kitchen echoed with constant shouting. She hurried from table to table, carefully balancing heavy trays while apologizing for delays she couldn't control. Every tip mattered because it helped pay rent and buy medicine for her younger brother. Despite aching feet and endless pressure, she greeted every guest with genuine kindness, determined never to let poverty steal her dignity or compassion. Across the dining room sat a distinguished man dressed in a simple gray suit. No expensive watch or flashy jewelry revealed that he owned one of the country's largest business empires. He preferred ordinary places because they reminded him of the difficult childhood he had escaped decades earlier. As he quietly enjoyed his lunch, he noticed the waitress helping an elderly customer with extraordinary patience. Her kindness felt genuine, not forced, and it stirred memories he had buried deep within his heart. Just as the afternoon rush reached its busiest moment, another waiter accidentally bumped into her while rushing past the kitchen entrance. A tray slipped from her trembling hands, crashing loudly onto the floor. Plates shattered into dozens of pieces, soup splashed across the expensive carpet, and frightened silence swept through the restaurant. Her face turned pale. She immediately knelt to clean the mess, apologizing repeatedly even though everyone had clearly seen that the accident was never her fault. The restaurant manager stormed across the dining room, his face burning with anger. Without asking what had happened, he shouted that she had embarrassed the restaurant in front of wealthy customers. Every harsh word echoed through the silent room as embarrassed guests looked away. She tried explaining that another employee had collided with her, but he refused to listen. Then, in front of everyone, he declared that she was fired immediately and ordered security to remove her from the building. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she refused to beg. She quietly removed her apron, knowing she couldn't afford to lose this job because her younger brother depended entirely on her income. Every bill waiting at home flashed through her mind like a nightmare. She remembered promising her late grandmother that she would never give up, no matter how difficult life became. Still, standing there surrounded by strangers, she felt more alone than she had ever felt before. Before security could take another step, a calm voice interrupted the silence. The man in the gray suit slowly stood from his table and politely asked the manager to stop. His tone remained gentle, yet every word carried undeniable authority. He explained that everyone in the restaurant had witnessed the accident and that blaming one innocent employee for someone else's mistake showed neither fairness nor leadership. The entire room turned toward him, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. The manager dismissed the stranger with a sarcastic smile, insisting that restaurant decisions belonged only to management. The older man quietly reached into his pocket, placed a business card on the nearest table, and invited the manager to read it carefully. Within seconds, the manager's confidence disappeared. His hands began shaking as he recognized the name of one of the country's most respected billionaires. Employees stared in disbelief while whispers spread throughout the restaurant like wildfire. Instead of humiliating the frightened manager, the billionaire simply asked one question. "If this young woman were your own daughter, would you still treat her this way?" The words struck the room with unexpected force. No one answered. The billionaire turned toward the waitress, gently picked up her fallen apron, and handed it back with quiet respect. For the first time that terrible afternoon, someone had looked at her not as a burden, but as a human being deserving kindness. As they spoke outside the restaurant, the billionaire noticed a small silver necklace hanging around her neck. His expression suddenly changed. The worn pendant looked almost identical to one his younger sister had owned before she disappeared with her husband many years earlier. His heartbeat quickened, though he tried hiding his emotions. Curious but respectful, he asked where she had received the necklace. The young waitress lowered her eyes and softly replied, "It belonged to my mother, and it's the only thing she left behind." The young waitress carefully removed the silver necklace and placed it in the billionaire's trembling hand. He stared at the tiny pendant for several silent seconds before gently opening it. Hidden inside was a faded photograph of a smiling young couple holding a newborn baby. His eyes widened with disbelief. The woman in the picture was his younger sister, whom everyone had believed was gone forever. His hands shook uncontrollably as decades of unanswered questions suddenly rushed back into his heart. She became frightened by the tears forming in the stranger's eyes. Softly, she explained that her grandmother had given her the necklace before passing away. She had always been told never to sell it, no matter how desperate life became, because one day it might lead her to someone important. She never understood those mysterious words until now. Looking at the billionaire's emotional face, she realized the necklace carried a story far greater than she had ever imagined. The billionaire struggled to steady his voice as painful memories flooded back. More than 20 years earlier, his younger sister had married a kind but poor schoolteacher against the wishes of many wealthy relatives. Refusing to accept their decision, the family had drifted apart. Then tragedy struck when the couple disappeared after a terrible highway accident during a violent storm. Authorities never found enough evidence to explain exactly what happened, leaving the family trapped in endless grief and unanswered hope. The waitress quietly revealed the little she knew. Her grandmother had told her that after the accident, she had been found alone beside a damaged vehicle, crying beneath heavy rain. No official documents remained, and no relatives could be located. Her grandmother raised her with unconditional love but possessed very little money. Years later, illness claimed her grandmother's life, leaving the young girl responsible for raising her younger brother while searching for answers about the family she had never truly known. The billionaire felt tears rolling down his face without shame. Every regret he had buried returned at once. He remembered ignoring his sister's desperate letters because pride had clouded his judgment. If he had reached out sooner, perhaps none of this suffering would have happened. Looking at the young waitress standing before him, exhausted yet dignified, he realized she had spent her entire life paying the price for mistakes she had never made. The weight of that truth broke his heart. Determined to uncover the complete story, he arranged a professional investigation using family records, hospital archives, and old newspaper reports. Days passed with anxious anticipation. Finally, the investigators uncovered forgotten documents proving that the child rescued after the accident had indeed been registered under temporary guardianship before records were misplaced during an administrative error. Every piece of evidence pointed toward one astonishing conclusion. The young waitress was truly his niece, the daughter his beloved sister had left behind. When he gently shared the truth, she stood frozen in complete disbelief. She had dreamed countless times about discovering where she belonged, yet never imagined finding family in such an unexpected way. Tears streamed down her cheeks as years of loneliness slowly melted into hope. The billionaire stepped forward with trembling arms and quietly asked if he could hug her. She nodded, and for the first time in her life, she experienced the comforting embrace of a loving family member. Their emotional reunion spread quickly through the restaurant staff and local community. Many people who had silently watched her humiliation felt ashamed for doing nothing. The billionaire never sought attention or praise. Instead, he returned to the restaurant and calmly spoke with every employee. He reminded them that wealth could purchase buildings, businesses, and luxury, but it could never buy compassion. True greatness, he explained, was measured by how people treated those with the least power. The restaurant owner, deeply embarrassed after learning the truth, personally apologized to the young waitress. The manager who had fired her also admitted his mistake, confessing that stress and pride had blinded him to simple fairness. Rather than seeking revenge, she quietly forgave them both. Her forgiveness surprised everyone more than her remarkable story. She believed bitterness only continued the cycle of pain, while mercy gave broken hearts the chance to become whole again. Although the billionaire invited her to move into his luxurious mansion immediately, she politely declined at first. She explained that happiness did not come from expensive houses but from keeping promises. Her younger brother still depended on her, and she wanted him to finish school without fear or disruption. The billionaire smiled through grateful tears. At that moment, he saw not only his sister reflected in her kindness but also the strength of a woman who had transformed suffering into extraordinary character. She continued working at the restaurant for another week, not because she needed the paycheck anymore, but because she wanted to leave with dignity. Her co-workers, who had once barely noticed her, now treated her with genuine respect. She thanked each of them for the small acts of kindness they had shown during difficult days. Before leaving, she quietly told the newest employees to never lose their compassion, because every customer and every coworker carried invisible battles that no one else could see. The billionaire kept his promise without trying to change who she was. Instead of showering her with luxury, he first helped her younger brother enroll in one of the country's finest schools. Watching the boy smile with excitement filled both of them with hope. Education had always been their dream, and now it was finally becoming reality. The billionaire realized that changing one child's future created a legacy far greater than building another company or earning another fortune. Together they visited the small cemetery where her grandmother rested. She placed fresh flowers beside the modest grave and whispered words of gratitude through tears. The billionaire stood quietly nearby, overwhelmed with respect for the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise his niece without expecting anything in return. He silently promised to honor her memory by protecting the family she had saved. In that peaceful place, grief slowly transformed into gratitude and love. A few weeks later, the billionaire introduced his niece to the rest of the family. Some relatives welcomed her with open arms, while others felt ashamed for the years they had allowed pride to separate loved ones. She greeted everyone with kindness instead of resentment. Her gentle heart softened even the hardest emotions. Slowly, the broken family began healing, proving that forgiveness often succeeds where anger and blame never can. Instead of living only for herself, she decided to create something meaningful from her painful experiences. With the billionaire's encouragement, she established a foundation that helped struggling students, single parents, and hardworking restaurant employees facing financial emergencies. She remembered every hungry night, every unpaid bill, and every tear hidden behind a forced smile. Those memories became the reason she refused to let others suffer alone when help was within her reach. News of her inspiring journey spread across the country. Television programs, newspapers, and community organizations invited her to share her story. Yet every interview ended the same way. She never focused on becoming part of a wealthy family. Instead, she reminded audiences that one simple act of kindness had changed everything. Had one stranger remained silent inside that restaurant, her life might have continued in endless hardship. Courage, she said, often begins with speaking up for someone else. The restaurant where everything happened slowly transformed as well. Employees received better training, fair treatment, and respectful leadership. The former manager became one of the strongest advocates for workplace kindness after learning from his painful mistake. Customers noticed the welcoming atmosphere, and business flourished more than ever before. Everyone discovered that respect was not only morally right, it also inspired loyalty, trust, and lasting success. One quiet evening, the billionaire and his niece shared dinner together. Looking across the table, he admitted that saving her had not made him a hero. Instead, she had saved him from years of regret and loneliness. She smiled gently and replied that families are not truly defined by blood or wealth but by love, forgiveness, and the willingness to stand beside each other during life's darkest moments. Those words stayed with him forever. As the years passed, the young woman became known not for inheriting wealth but for earning respect through humility and compassion. She never forgot where she came from. She still visited small neighborhood restaurants, spoke kindly with waiters and waitresses, and secretly paid meals for struggling families whenever she could. Every act of generosity reminded her of the frightened girl who had once believed her life was falling apart. Sometimes the greatest miracle does not arrive as money, fame, or success. Sometimes it arrives as one person who refuses to ignore another person's pain. A billionaire stood up for a frightened waitress because he believed every human being deserved dignity. In return, he found the family he thought he had lost forever. Their journey proved that kindness can heal broken hearts, restore forgotten families, and create hope where none seemed possible. The restaurant where she once cried became the place where her new life began. She entered that building as a forgotten waitress, but she walked out with something far more valuable than wealth: a family, a future, and the certainty that kindness always finds its way back. The billionaire discovered that the greatest treasure he had ever recovered was not hidden in business or fortune, but in the loving heart of the niece he never stopped searching for. Moral of the story: never judge someone's worth by their job, clothes, or circumstances. One act of kindness can uncover hidden truths, heal generations of pain, and change lives forever. Compassion is the richest gift any person can give,